Humanity's first step into the stars wasn't a triumphant leap, but a massacre. Not a peaceful exchange of ideas, not a handshake between civilizations, but a silent, brutal extermination. It began with the first wave of deep space explorers, pioneers, scientists, dreamers who had left Earth not for conquest, but for discovery. Their final transmission? Static. Then screams. At first we thought it was a malfunction, a solar flare, a miscalculation in deep space travel. But when the second wave vanished, then the third, we knew something was wrong. And then the message came. A simple broadcast intercepted on every frequency, spoken in a cold, alien voice. This is a warning. The anomaly designated as humanity is to be contained. Do not venture beyond your system. Do not seek what is not yours. Your kind is a danger to balance. The Galactic Council has spoken. The Galactic Council, a union of ancient and powerful civilizations, ruling over thousands of star systems. Their judgment was absolute, their authority unchallenged. To them, we were nothing, but an aberration, a species too reckless, too unpredictable, too violent. We were not to be reasoned with. We were to be erased. Their fleet arrived in silence. No negotiations, no demands, no mercy. Their dreadnoughts loomed over our colonies like gods of war, casting shadows over entire continents. The bombardment began within minutes. Cities crumbled. Skies turned black with smoke. In a single day, millions were gone. Men, women, children, erased as if they had never existed. But what they didn't understand, what they failed to comprehend, was that humanity has never been a species to kneel. They thought they were putting down a rabid animal. What they had actually done was awaken something far, far worse. Because here's the thing about humanity. We don't surrender, we don't forget, and we don't forgive. The Council had made wars before. They had crushed rebellions, vaporized entire planets, and rewritten history to hide their atrocities. To them, this was just another act of control. Another race wiped away before it could become a threat. But humanity? We weren't just another primitive species waiting to be stamped out. We were adaptable, relentless, and, above all else, vengeful. At first, it was desperation. A handful of survivors, scattered across the ruins of our worlds, fighting back with whatever scraps of technology they could salvage. They were outnumbered, outgunned. It should have been impossible. But humanity has never followed the rules of the possible. Our first counterstrike wasn't with fleets or armies. We had neither. Instead, we did what we do best. We learned. We adapted. We evolved. Their technology, we stole it. Their ships, we hijacked them. Their own biological weaknesses, we exploited them. They relied on psionics, telepathic communication across vast distances. So we built scramblers, filling their minds with unbearable noise. They thrived on order and hierarchy. So we took out their leaders one by one, until their own people turned against them. Their most secure planets? We turned them into laboratories, dissecting their technology, discovering every single flaw. Within months, entire Council supply chains collapsed. Key figures started disappearing. Their most fortified stations were being raided by what they had once considered savages. And just when they thought they could contain us, we proved them wrong. Because the thing about humanity, we don't stop. We don't bow. And when you try to wipe us out, we don't just fight back. We make sure you never forget why that was. A mistake. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. And now, the real war begins. The Galactic Council had ruled for thousands of years. They were the architects of cosmic order, the gatekeepers of interstellar law, the enforcers of what they called balance. To them, war was not about honor or survival. It was about control. They had encountered countless species before us, watched civilizations rise and fall, and in every case, they dictated the terms. If a species fit their criteria, obedient, compliant, predictable. They were integrated into the fold. If not, they were erased before they could become a problem. The Council saw themselves as gods, presiding over a universe they believed was theirs alone to shape. But they had never encountered anything like humanity. When they wiped out our colonies, they believed they had delivered the killing blow. They saw us as a minor species, a mere inconvenience, far too primitive to pose a real threat. Their warlords laughed at the idea of human resistance. Their strategists dismissed the notion of retaliation. They thought the massacre would end with silence. But the thing about humanity, we are never silent. At first, they didn't even notice the war had begun. The first Council vessel to go missing was a minor transport ship, vanishing along a routine patrol route. Then, another. And another. Their security reports listed it as technical failures, but that was a lie. The truth? We had infiltrated them. A handful of survivors, armed with stolen knowledge and sheer human ingenuity, had learned how to mimic their transmissions, how to sneak into their systems, how to turn their own arrogance against them. The attacks were surgical. A distress call would lure a Council vessel into a remote sector, only for it to disappear without a trace. Space stations would go dark. Overnight, entire outposts found abandoned, their inhabitants missing. It was more than just warfare. It was psychological. We made them afraid of the dark. The Galactic Council, for all its power, was not built for chaos. Their strength had never been in their ability to fight, but in their ability to maintain order. They had never needed to question their superiority. They had never faced an enemy that adapted as quickly as we did, that learned from every loss and turned it into their next victory. And worst of all, they had never faced an enemy that wanted revenge. Humanity didn't fight like the other species. They had exterminated. We didn't line up in neat, predictable fleets. We didn't engage in ceremonial battles with honorable tactics. We fought the way we had always fought, like cornered predators, with nothing to lose. We turned their supply chains against them. We stole their warships and turned them into Trojan horses, filled with soldiers who had nothing left but the hunger to kill. We infected their networks, slipping through their firewalls like ghosts, erasing records, rewriting battle plans, turning their own intelligence into a weapon. Entire sectors fell without a single shot fired. A Council battleship entering hyperspace would exit in an uncharted void, never to be seen again. Political leaders began disappearing from their own palaces, vanishing in the dead of night without a trace. The Council's elite, once untouchable, now lived in fear, checking every shadow, every whisper, every movement. They had started a war they believed would be over in days. Now, months had passed, and humanity was not just surviving. We were winning. Their response was swift. The Council, realizing that their extermination campaign had failed, escalated the war. If precision strikes couldn't break us, they would use overwhelming force. They assembled what they called the Purge Fleet, a force unlike anything the HFY universe had ever seen. Thousands of warships, planetary siege cannons, entire armadas dedicated to one goal: the complete and utter eradication of the human race. They were no longer interested in containment. They wanted extinction. But the thing about humanity? We don't die easy. By the time the Purge Fleet arrived, we were ready. We had studied their tactics, their formations, their weaknesses. We had spent every moment turning their own technology into weapons against them. And when their grand fleet descended upon the last human strongholds, they didn't find a broken species waiting to be destroyed. They found something else entirely. We had become something new, something they had never expected. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting to make them pay, and we had just begun. The Purge Fleet arrived with the force of a dying star. Thousands of warships, each the size of a small city, blotting out the light of distant suns. Their hulls gleamed with alien metals stronger than anything humanity had ever forged. Their weapons, powerful enough to crack a planet's crust, ignited the void like vengeful gods descending upon the unworthy. The Council had underestimated us before, but not this time. This time, they weren't taking chances. Their fleets came in waves, forming an impenetrable wall of destruction. The first planet to fall was a human stronghold, a world known as New Terra, one of our last remaining colonies. For all our stolen technology, for all our relentless counterstrikes, we could not hold it. The orbital bombardment lasted 17 hours, reducing mountains to ash, turning oceans into boiling wastelands. When the dust settled, there was no city left to conquer. No bodies to recover. Only silence. They thought that would break us. Instead, it did the opposite. See, when humanity faces destruction, we don't crumble. We sharpen, we harden. We become something the universe has never seen before. The Council believed they were hunting us, but the truth was, we had led them exactly where we wanted. Because while they were busy burning our planets, we were already inside theirs. The war had never been about open battle. Humanity had learned that lesson long ago, from our own wars, our own history. Against an enemy with superior numbers, superior firepower, superior resources, there was only one way to win. You make them choke on their own strength, and that's exactly what we did. The moment the Purge fleet committed to planetary extermination, their supply lines became vulnerable. Entire convoys carrying fuel, food, and weapons simply vanished, ambushed in deep space by human warbands. Strategic hyperlanes once thought secure became death traps, littered with the wreckage of Council freighters. Our spies had already mapped their infrastructure, their weaknesses, their blind spots. We weren't just hitting them where it hurt, we were tearing out their throat. The true battle wasn't fought on the surface of New Terra or in the ruins of fallen colonies. It was fought in the shadows. The first major blow came when humanity struck at Vashtir Prime, one of the Council's core worlds. It was a planet untouched by war, a place of diplomacy and commerce, where politicians and warlords plotted the future of the galaxy from their ivory towers. It had been deemed untouchable, far beyond humanity's reach, until, one day, its planetary defense grid went dark. The attack was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Not an invasion, not an orbital assault. No fleets descended from the sky. No battle formations were detected. Instead, something far worse happened. Every major city was simultaneously thrown into chaos. Spaceports erupted in flames as sabotaged fuel lines ignited like fireworks. The planet-wide AI that controlled security forces suddenly turned on its own people, marking high-ranking officials as enemies of the state. Assassins, disguised as loyal servants and advisors, struck from the shadows, slitting the throats of the very leaders who had ordered humanity's extinction. By the time the Council realized what was happening, it was too late. The planetary governor, one of the architects of the Purge fleet, was found hanging from the spire of his own palace, his body broken, his eyes still frozen in horror. A single message was scrawled in his own blood on the walls behind him. You should have let us be. The news spread like wildfire. The Council had thought they were exterminating an infestation. Instead, they had awakened something far worse. A force that didn't play by their rules, that didn't fear them, that didn't stop. They had started this war. Now, humanity was making it ours, and we weren't just here to survive, we were here to win. The fall of Vashtir Prime sent a tremor through the Galactic Council. This was no longer a contained conflict, no longer a minor uprising to be silenced. Humanity had done the impossible. We had struck at the very heart of their dominion, defiling the sanctity of a world thought untouchable. The Council's warlords gathered in secret, their voices sharp with fear and fury. How? How had a species so young, so reckless, managed to infiltrate their most secure bastion? How had the Purge fleet failed to wipe us from existence? What they refused to understand, what they would never understand, was the simple truth of humanity. We don't fight fair. We don't fight by the rules. And when you threaten everything we have, everything we are, we become something far worse than a species struggling to survive. We become vengeance. The Council's response was immediate. They enacted the Protocol of Absolute Erasure, a decree that had only been issued twice in galactic history. The first had been against an insectoid species that had devoured entire planets, reducing lush worlds to barren husks. The second had been against an artificial intelligence that had gone rogue, attempting to assimilate all organic life. Both were seen as existential threats to the stability of the galaxy. Both had been eradicated completely, their names erased. From history, their existence wiped from every record. And now, humanity was the third. Their armies mobilized like never before. New weapons were forged, weapons designed to counter the unpredictable tactics of humanity. Entire planets were transformed into factories, churning out warships at an unimaginable rate. Elite hunters were dispatched across the galaxy, assassins, trained in ancient arts of psionic warfare, bred for one purpose: to seek out and eliminate human leaders, wherever they hid. The war had escalated beyond skirmishes and sabotage. Now, it was total annihilation. But what the Council failed to realize was that they had already lost control. Because humanity wasn't just fighting in the shadows anymore. We had become something else. A force they could no longer contain. It started with the liberation of EOS-7, a planet that had once been one of humanity's earliest colonies before the Council razed it to the ground. For years, its surface had been a wasteland of ash and ruin, declared uninhabitable by the Council. But what they hadn't expected, what they never could have anticipated, was that we had returned. Hidden beneath the planet's scorched surface, human engineers, scientists, and warriors had built something new. A fortress, carved from the bones of a dead world. A city built in secret, where stolen Council technology had been reverse-engineered and improved, where human ingenuity turned their weapons against them. And when the time came, when the Purge fleet moved to secure their victory, humanity revealed its greatest weapon: the Legion fleet. No longer were we fighting with scavenged ships and stolen firepower. No longer were we hiding in the dark, striking from the shadows. The Legion fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Council ships were built for dominance, for enforcing order through sheer, overwhelming force. Ours were built for one thing: total, merciless war. The first battle was swift. The Council's armada, expecting another desperate human resistance, moved into EOS-7's orbit with confidence. They expected an easy slaughter. Instead, they found an ambush. 1,000 human warships burst from the blackness of space, their hulls laced with stolen Council shielding, their weapons modified beyond anything the enemy could comprehend. These were no longer simple, fragile human vessels. These were instruments of retribution, driven by soldiers who had nothing left but the will to destroy. The Council fleet never stood a chance. Their formations crumbled within minutes, their warships caught in a relentless crossfire. The psionic commanders, the ones who had once crushed resistance with a mere thought, found their minds flooded with chaos. Human scramblers flooding their neural links with static, turning their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. And then, for the first time in the war, a Council flagship fell. Not just disabled, not just forced into retreat. Fell. Its core ruptured, its hull split apart like glass, and for the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, one of their greatest warships was obliterated, not by a rebellion, not by infighting, but by the very species they had sought to exterminate. The aftermath was chaos. The surviving Council ships scattered, fleeing into hyperspace, their commanders too stunned to comprehend what had happened. A single transmission echoed across the system, intercepted on every frequency, carried on a signal that no one could block. A message, broadcasted from the heart of the Legion fleet, from the leader of humanity's resistance: "You should have left us alone." In that moment, the war changed. The Council had believed they were crushing an infestation. Now, they knew the truth. They had created a monster. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. We were coming for them, and we would not stop until the stars burned with their downfall. The fall of the first Council flagship sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Entire species, long subjugated under the Council's iron rule, began to whisper of something impossible: an empire that was not invincible, an enemy that could bleed. Fear spread through the halls of their grandest cities, their warlords speaking, in hushed voices, of the humans who had defied extermination, who had turned their own weapons against them. And in the darkness, those who had long suffered under the Council's rule began to hope. For humanity, there was no turning back. We had spent too long in the shadows, striking at their fleets, dismantling their supply lines, poisoning their own infrastructure against them. Now, with the full force of the Legion fleet, we weren't just fighting back. We were waging a war of conquest. We didn't move like an empire. We didn't claim worlds for glory or dominion. We moved like a storm, consuming everything in our path. Our warships, built from the wreckage of fallen council vessels, bore no insignia, only the scars of a people who refused to be erased. Our soldiers, no longer mere survivors, had become something more: avengers, executioners, ghosts. But for all our victories, the war was far from over. The council had ruled for millennia, not just through force, but through control. Their empire stretched across thousands of worlds, their armies numbering in the billions. And while we had won our first true battle, the warlords of the council were already preparing for their counterstrike. They had learned from their failures. The council had always relied on technological supremacy, believing their ships and weapons made them untouchable. But after Vashtir Prime, after EOS 7, they understood. We had caught up. Humanity had adapted too quickly, stolen too much of their knowledge, turned too many of their own tactics against them. So, they turned to something older, something ancient, something that had kept them in power for longer than even their own records could remember. The Harbinger Protocol. It was a name that had not been spoken for thousands of years, a final failsafe buried deep within the archives of the Council's ruling caste. The Harbinger Protocol was not a weapon, not a fleet, not a battle strategy. It was an extinction event. Deep beneath the capital world of the Council, beneath layers of planetary shielding and forgotten ruins older than their own civilization, there lay a chamber, and within that chamber, a secret that had never been unleashed. The Council had not built their empire alone. They had found it, in the ruins of dead civilizations, in the forgotten echoes of races that had come before. They had never spoken of the ones who had built the great hyperspace gates, the ancient monoliths scattered across the void, the technology they had reverse-engineered into their own war machines. Because those beings had vanished, or so they had believed. The Harbinger Protocol was their last resort. It was never meant to be used, not unless the Council itself faced destruction. It was a message, sent into the void, broadcast on frequencies that no living species could understand. A signal, a call, and something answered. We didn't realize it at first. The war had been moving in our favor. One by one, we had begun dismantling the outer sectors of the Council's dominion. We had turned their own people against them, sowing rebellion in the shadows. Entire fleets had surrendered without a fight, their commanders defecting rather than face humanity's wrath. But then, the disappearances began. At first, it was small. A listening post, suddenly going silent. A fleet, traveling through the void, simply vanishing from existence. There were no wreckages, no distress calls, no signs of battle. They were there. Then they were not. And then, we received the first transmission. It came from a human colony, on the fringe of Council space. A world that had only just been reclaimed, its people still rebuilding from the destruction of the First War. The message was short, garbled, broken by static. But the voice that spoke was not human. We have heard your war. We have watched your struggle. And now, we have come to end it. And then, nothing. When we sent ships to investigate, the colony was gone. Not destroyed. Not razed to the ground. Gone. No signs of life. No bodies. No wreckage. As if the entire planet had been erased from reality itself. The Council had awoken something older than them. Something older than all of us, and for the first time since this war began, humanity was no longer fighting for vengeance. We were fighting for survival. The war had shifted. Before, it had been a brutal struggle of attrition. Humanity against the Galactic Council. A battle of cunning, sacrifice, and sheer stubborn refusal to die. We had been outnumbered, outgunned, but never outwitted. We adapted. We struck from the shadows. And when we finally emerged, it was with fire and fury unlike anything the Council had ever seen. But now, everything had changed. The Council's secret weapon, the Harbinger Protocol, had turned the war into something else entirely. They had sent a signal into the void, an ancient distress beacon buried beneath their capital world for untold millennia. A last resort, never meant to be used unless they faced total annihilation. and something had answered. At first, we didn't understand. Our fleets continued their assaults, tearing through Council defenses, liberating enslaved worlds, breaking the chains of their dominion one system at a time. The momentum was ours. Their forces were scattered, their leaders fractured, their war machine breaking apart beneath the weight of their failures. And then, we began to lose entire fleets. Not in battle, not to the Council's desperate counterattacks. They simply vanished. It started at the outermost edges of explored space, near a planet known as Drakenhold, a human colony that had only recently been reclaimed. One day, it was thriving. People rebuilding, industry humming, defenses being reinforced. Then, in an instant, it was gone. No distress calls, no wreckage, no signs of a fight. An entire planet, erased. We sent scout ships. They didn't return. We sent a fleet. It never arrived. Only one transmission came through before all contact was lost. A garbled message, filled with static, but beneath the distortion, we heard something chilling, a voice, not human, not Council. You are not the first. The war came to a sudden halt, not by treaty, not by surrender, but by sheer terror. Something was hunting us, something older than the Council, older than any of us. The first encounter, it happened near the ruins of Tarsus 9, a dead world, long abandoned, rumored to be one of the earliest colonies of the Council's forerunners. The place was a graveyard of ancient war machines, derelict starships, and forgotten structures so massive they could only have been built by something far greater than anything we had ever known. We had sent a recon force, 3 destroyers, lightly armed but fast. Their mission was simple: scan for survivors, search for answers, return. They made it to orbit. They sent back initial reports. Then, silence. We picked up an energy surge, something not natural, not Council-made. And then, a ripple. Space itself twisted, as if something was shifting between dimensions, like a tear in the very fabric of reality. And from that tear, it emerged. A ship, but not like anything we had ever seen. It was massive, impossibly large, its silhouette, jagged, shifting, as if it wasn't fully bound by the same laws of physics we understood. Its surface was blacker than the void itself, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. There were no visible weapons, no signs of propulsion, no recognizable structure. And yet, the moment it arrived, our recon fleet ceased to exist, not destroyed, not even attacked. One moment, they were there. The next, they were gone. Their last transmission consisted of only 2 words: "They see." We tried to analyze the event. We sent probes. Every single one disappeared the moment they neared the anomaly. No energy signatures, no weapons fire, just deletion. It was as if reality itself had swallowed them whole. The elders of the void, the Council, in all its arrogance, had assumed their dominion over the galaxy was absolute, that their empire had always been the pinnacle of civilization. They were wrong. What they had kept hidden, buried in the deepest records of their forbidden archives, was that their rule had not begun with conquest. It had begun with fear. The Council had not created galactic civilization. They had inherited it. The first Council species, their ancestors, had stumbled upon an abandoned network of hyperspace gates, monolithic structures far beyond their understanding. Entire star systems filled with ruins, evidence of a race that had come before them. But of that race, there was nothing left. No bodies, no signs of war, no clues to their disappearance. Only their abandoned cities, their lifeless megastructures, their silent monuments to a forgotten age. The early Council species had done the only thing they knew. They had taken what they could, reverse-engineered what they didn't understand, and built their empire atop the bones of those who came before. But some secrets were never meant to be unearthed. The Harbinger Protocol had sent a call outward. It had awakened something. And now, it was coming back. The final stand. The first major battle against the unknown took place in the Dyson Graveyard, a system littered with the wreckage of civilizations past. Human forces, along with defected Council fleets, had fortified the sector, preparing for a final push toward the Council homeworld. It was supposed to be the beginning of the end, the strike that would bring down the last vestiges of Council power. Instead, it became our first true nightmare. They came without warning, not through hyperspace lanes, not through any detectable method. One moment our fleet stood ready, the next the sky was filled with them. Vast, unknowable ships, their forms shifting, warping, as if reality itself struggled to contain them. They did not fire conventional weapons. There were no lasers, no missiles, no railguns. Instead, space itself collapsed around them. Entire battleships were unmade, their atoms scattering into nothingness. Shields meant nothing. Armor meant nothing. Weapons meant nothing. And then, the voices began. Across every open frequency, a single phrase, spoken in a language older than stars, yet one we all understood. "You are not worthy." Within minutes, our entire fleet was in full retreat, but it wasn't enough. Planets in the sector began to vanish. Not destroyed, not bombarded, erased. We were no longer fighting the Council. We were no longer fighting for revenge. We were fighting for existence itself. The Council had thought they were the rulers of the galaxy. We had thought we were the rebels, the avengers of injustice. But in truth, we were all just insects to something far older. Something that had once ruled before, and had come back to reclaim its domain. Humanity had survived extermination before. We had defied death itself to strike back at the Council. But now, we were out of time.